8 billion. It's a hard number to really get your head around. 8 billion people all sharing the same planet. Makes you think, can we actually make a future where everyone can thrive,
Hmm.
especially with limited resources?
Yeah, it's definitely something that keeps a lot of people up at night, especially when you consider how some parts of the world are growing much faster than others and how unevenly spread out everyone is.
And that's what we're diving into today. We got a whole bunch of research on human populations, global trends, basic definitions, all of that, and we're going to try and pull out the most interesting bits.
It's not even just about how many people there are. It's about understanding population density, what drives population growth, and the effect all of this has on our world.
Right, like I always thought population density was just how many people were crammed into one area. But I saw slide one. North America seems pretty spacious.
It does. It really does. But what that slide shows is that you can't just look at how much land there is. Huge chunks of it are deserts or massive mountain ranges or places without enough water. These places might be geographically important, but you can't really fit a lot of people on them. Not if you want them to, thrive.
So it's like looking at this huge cake, but you realize you can only actually eat a tiny sliver of it, and suddenly it feels a bit more crowded.
Exactly. And that's where things get interesting. If you look back at how populations have grown, like on slide 4, it wasn't this steady thing. It was more like a really slow burn for, well, a very long time. And then,
Yeah.
bam, the agricultural revolution happened.
We figured out how to grow way more food so we could all settle down and have more kids. But even then, it took the Industrial Revolution for things to really explode.
Exactly. It
Hmm.
makes you think about carrying capacity, that idea from the logistic growth model. Think of Earth like a boat. The Industrial Revolution meant we could build a bigger boat. But at the end of the day, it's still a boat. And if we keep piling on more people and more stuff, well, at some point it's going to be a problem.
And let's be honest, these days we're sailing pretty close to the weight limit, aren't we? And those exponential growth models, they're feeling a little too real right now.
They really are, aren't they? And that's exactly why understanding the demographic transition model is so important. That's on slide 5. It lays out 4 different stages of population growth based on the birth rate and death rate.
It's like watching one of those sped up films of societies changing through time. Stage one, high birth rates, high death rates. It really paints that picture of life before modern medicine and sanitation. And then things start to shift, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where it gets really interesting. We start to see this fascinating split between industrialized nations and developing nations. It's all laid out on slides 6 and 8. So in industrialized nations, you have better healthcare, education, and access to contraception. Those lead to both birth and death rates falling. That means slower, more stable population growth.
But then you look at developing nations. Death rates go down, but birth rates stay high, and you get those really rapid increases we talked about earlier. Makes you wonder, what are the biggest things driving those differences?
It's this complex combination of things: access to healthcare, education, especially for women, and even just cultural norms. What we see with these stages is that empowering people to make their own choices about family planning is super important.
So it's not about telling people how many kids they can have. It's about giving them the knowledge and resources to make the best decisions for their own families. And that actually brings us to the concept of zero population growth, right?
Yeah. But remember, it's not about completely stopping population growth. Think of it more like finding that balance where the number of births is about the same as the number of deaths. It's about reaching a point that's sustainable for everyone.
And what we've seen is that balance point, it's going to be different for every country. It's this moving target, always changing based on things happening inside the country and around the world.
Which brings us to this huge question. What are the global consequences of all of this? Can we actually create a world where everyone has the chance to thrive even as the number of people keeps going up?
And that is exactly what we are going to get into next. We're going to explore how population growth might impact us, the good and the bad, and really dig into whether a planet with limited resources can actually support us all. Stay tuned. It really does feel like we're standing right at the edge of this huge question, doesn't it? Can this planet, can it really handle what 8 billion people need? And then you add even more people on top of that, especially when you see images like the one on slide 7, that whole city just covered in smog.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? It's like this powerful reminder of how more people means a much bigger demand on resources. We need more of everything: food, energy, water, housing, you name it. We need more of it. And if we aren't really careful about managing those resources well, things could get bad.
It's like we're all this giant potluck. But some people showed up with, like, way bigger plates and not enough food to go around.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. And we haven't even talked about what it does to our infrastructure.
Yeah.
Transportation, think about all those traffic jams. Healthcare systems that just can't keep up. Schools so overcrowded, there's barely room to breathe.
It's like this domino effect,
Yeah.
People can't get to their jobs, kids aren't getting a good education, and trying to get basic services becomes this huge ordeal. You can just feel all this, like, social and political tension building up.
And it's even worse in places that are already dealing with things like poverty or conflict, places where they don't have reliable access to even the basics. Slide 11 really shows us the way resources are spread out around the world. It's just not fair.
It's a lot to think about. But is it, like, overly simplistic to say that having more people is the root of all these problems?
That's a really good point, because on its own, population growth is neutral. It's really about the context. Take population decline, for instance. You might think that's the obvious answer if there are too many people, but like slide 12 shows, it comes with its own issues.
It's like thinking, oh, if I just shrink myself down, I can fit in this tiny box, no problem. And then you realize you had to leave all your stuff behind. Fewer people also means fewer people to do the work that can really hurt industries and even slow down economic growth and new ideas.
And then there's the pressure it puts on our social safety nets. When you have a smaller group of people paying taxes, it gets a lot harder to fund important programs, things like healthcare, education, even just making sure people have enough to retire on.
Feels like we're always walking this tightrope, doesn't it? Trying to find this perfect balance, making sure there's enough without having too much. If this has shown us anything, it's that there's no easy answer, no one-size-fits-all when it comes to this stuff.
Absolutely not. What works for one country might be a disaster for another one. Every part of the world has its own unique challenges and its own unique opportunities.
So where does that leave us? I mean, is there any hope at all, or are we all just doomed to be, like, swallowed up by the sheer scale of this?
You know me, I'm an optimist. Humans are incredibly ingenious. We've faced some pretty massive challenges in the past, and we always seem to find a way. We've gotten rid of some terrible diseases, explored the deepest parts of the ocean, even gone to space.
It's hard not to feel a bit better when you put it like that. We have found ways through some big problems before. So when we think about a future with 8 billion people, maybe even 10 billion, where everyone has what they need, where do we even start?
Well, that really is the big question, isn't it? If we've learned anything from this deep dive, it's that the answers aren't simple. But maybe it's not about finding one big solution. Maybe it's more about understanding how all the different pieces fit together.
It's like that discussion question on slide 13 about balancing the number of people with using resources sustainably. It's not even just about having enough, is it? It's about making sure everyone has equal access to what they need.
Exactly. Think about it globally. We produce enough food to feed every single person. But millions of people still go hungry every day. It's not that there isn't enough food. The problem is how it's distributed and who has access to it.
Which makes you think, what if we could distribute resources better and really invest in ways to be more sustainable and make sure everyone has access to education and healthcare? Could we actually turn things around?
I mean, it's not about pretending everything will be perfect. There will always be challenges. But what I'm saying is that humans are capable of amazing things when we work together. Look at the progress we've made with renewable energy and things like sustainable agriculture, global health initiatives. All of that shows what we can do.
Yeah. It's like we're writing the story of the future, right? And maybe there's no guarantee of a happy ending, but we can definitely choose what we do next. It all comes down to taking action, whether it's pushing for different policies, supporting the organizations doing the work on the ground, or just being more mindful in our own lives. Every little bit counts.
You got it. It's easy to get overwhelmed by the bigness of it all, but never underestimate what one person can do, especially when we all work together.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into human populations, remember 8 billion people. That's 8 billion chances for innovation and collaboration and positive change. We're all creating the future together, one choice at a time.
It's been a fascinating deep dive, that's for sure.
It really has. And with that, we'll leave you with all the possibilities. Thanks for coming on this journey with us right into the heart of human populations.